In 2022, we celebrate 130 years of HBCU football. On December 27th, 1892, Livingstone and Biddle College, now known as Johnson C. Smith University, played in Salisbury, North Carolina, with Biddle winning 5-0. Over time, HBCU football has evolved. HBCU football's popularity continues to rise. Millions attend games each year and millions more watch on television. The HBCU bands provide some of the top entertainment in the country. Over that time, some of the best players to ever play in the National Football League played at HBCUs. Every Monday through Friday on the HBCU Football Daily Podcast, national radio and television host Donal Ware takes a look at what's happening in HBCU football and talks with coaches, players, administrators, and media about the 2022 season. Make sure you join the conversation on social media by using the hashtag HBCU130. Now, here's your host, Donal Ware.
You've got it locked to the HBCU Football Daily Podcast for today, Friday, August the 5th. I'm Donal Ware. It's Friday. Tell you what, I'm looking forward to the weekend, and I hope you enjoyed the conversation with Quentin Morgan, the head football coach at Langston, who joined us on the HBCU Football Daily Podcast on yesterday. We talked about the program, obviously, but he also talked about a period of time with his son where his son was dealing with cancer. And so he talked candidly. I didn't know that. And he talked candidly about that. So I appreciate him sharing that. And you know that the Lions are going to have a pretty good season this year, poised to have a good season this year. 7-3, not good enough for the Lions, not good enough for Quentin Morgan. So you know they're poised to have a good season in 2022. Want to get back to those NAIA playoffs and want to get back to the top of the Sooner Athletic Conference. So today I want to talk about the HBCU All-America preseason team. Of course, Florida A&M's Isaiah Land leads that team. Willie Simmons, the head coach of the Rattlers, scheduled to join us at some point next week right here on the HBCU Football Daily Podcast. But it's led by Isaiah Land, and it's also led by Shedeur Sanders, the quarterback of Jackson State. You had 29 players that were on the HBCU All-America team, a lot of holdovers from last year and some new players also as well. We're going to go through this list. As a matter of fact, you talk about quarterback, and I think there's some talent. This is the thing. Like, I think there are some talented quarterbacks when you're talking about HBCU football, right? And I mean, Shedeur Sanders basically got all of the vote. He was a unanimous selection in terms of from the quarterback position, and rightfully so. I mean, you're talking about a young man that threw 30 touchdowns on last year, only 30 touchdowns to a handful of interceptions, maybe like 4 interceptions, something like that. He completed 66% of his passes. He was 7th in all of FCS in terms of pass completion percentage. When you watched him play last year, I mean, he was spot on, hit his targets, didn't miss a lot of balls. More importantly, as a true freshman, did not make a lot of mistakes as a whole. And so, I mean, there's no question about it. But I mean, when I look at this list, I look at Dralen Ellis from Tennessee State. Now, he was a second team all OVC performer last year for Austin Peay. So he comes now to Tennessee State with those credentials. I think he was the preseason player of the year last year in the OVC. I mean, I look at Kahari Lane of Fayetteville State, had a good season. He had like a touchdown to interception ratio of like 21-4 as the Broncos got back to the CIAA championship. And also joining us next week will be Fayetteville State head football coach Richard Hayes here on the program. So I think, I look at Davius Richard out of North Carolina Central. I mean, you look at Corey Fields out of South Carolina State. I mean, there are some quarterbacks, Deontay Bonet out of Albany. I mean, there's some quarterbacks But I mean, I think clearly the quarterback was Shedeur Sanders for what he was able to do on last year. Your three running backs, Gary Quarles out of Alabama A&M, Caleb Johnson out of Mississippi Valley State, and J.J. Davis out of Norfolk State. When I think of Quarles, I mean, Quarles did very well in the spring of last year, came on, did very well. I mean, he averaged something like 7.2 yards per carry. He's one of the leaders in FCS in terms of yards per carry. So I thought he was absolutely tremendous. You look at J.J. Davis of Norfolk State. He was voted the preseason MEAC Player of the Year as a young man that can really tote the rock. But not only that, not only can he tote the rock, I mean, you know, he's a young man that also can really, he's versatile. He's versatile in that respect. And I need to correct myself. So J.J. Davis was the one that averaged 7.2 yards per carry on last year. But Quarles, I mean, was really good as well. 19 rushing touchdowns on the season. He averaged 4.7 yards per carry and averaged 95.5 yards rushing per game. He almost had 1,000 yards rushing on last year. And then you look at Caleb Johnson. Caleb Johnson, I believe he led all HBCU running backs in rushing at over 1,000 yards last year. And that Mississippi Valley State offense, don't sleep on Mississippi Valley State this year. I think it's a team that's going to surprise a lot of people. And I think a lot of that begins with the running game in Caleb Johnson, who really, he led the conference in rushing attempts. He had 1,018 yards rushing on last year, rushed for 8 touchdowns as well. So I really like Mississippi Valley State this year. So those are your running backs. Your offensive lineman, Quindante Bobo out of Bowie State, was a holdover from the 2021 All-America team. Dallas Black out of Southern. Watch for Dallas Black. This is a young man that a lot of people are really, really high on. And so watch out for him. He's one of your offensive linemen. Mark Evans, the second out of Arkansas Pine Bluff, didn't make the All-America team last year, although he was an honorable mention All-American last year. But in the 2021 spring season, he made the All-American team. Tony Gray out of Jackson State is going to be a really good one, an anchor on that offensive line for Jackson State as well. And then you've got Robert Lacey, the other holdover out of Tennessee State. Your tight end is Kamari Averett out of Bethune-Cookman. I mean, he had a phenomenal season. I mean, he had, if I'm not mistaken, he averaged somewhere close to 20 yards per reception for a tight end, which is really, really tremendous. Your wide receivers, Abdul Fateh Ibrahim out of Alabama A&M, is absolutely tremendous. Was on the All-American team last year, was on the spring All-American team, as was absolutely tremendous. One of the best receivers in all of FCS. And then Shaquan Davis out of South Carolina State. Remember, 5 receptions, 95 yards, 3 touchdowns in the Celebration Bowl victory over Jackson State. He's absolutely tremendous and is going to have he's got a big body. He's a big body wide receiver. He's going to have a tremendous season on this year. You look at the defense on your defensive line. Jason Dumas is a holdover. Now, remember, Jason Dumas played last year at Prairie View A&M, and now he comes over to Southern, makes the move, comes over to Southern now. And so I think that's a huge move for Southern, for him to be able to come over there. And I think he's going to have a tremendous impact. He comes over with Eric Dooley, who's now the head coach at Southern. And then also on the other side is Jordan Lewis. Now, people may look and say, well, Jordan Lewis had a down season. Not necessarily. It's just his numbers weren't the same numbers that he put up. A couple of things. His numbers weren't the same as the numbers that he put up in the spring when he was named the BOXTOROW Willie Davis Defensive Player of the Year. Also won the Buck Buchanan Award as the best defensive player in FCS. And number 2, he received a lot of double teams as well. So that's tough. But you got those 2 bookends, right? You got Jablonski Green out of South Carolina State, was voted the MEAC's preseason defensive player of the year. He's absolutely tremendous. And then also rounding out that list from the defensive line position, Sundiata Anderson out of Grambling. Watch out for him. That's a young man that can play as well. Your linebackers, obviously, Isaiah Land. You're talking about 19 sacks on the season. You're also talking about 25 and a half tackles for loss. The young man is poised to have a really good season. He's got to be, he's going to see some double teams as well this year. So I know Willie Simmons and his defensive staff planning for that, so that Land can still make some plays there as well. But he plays that linebacker position. He's going to make some plays anyway, but he's more of a 3-4 kind of guy. So they're going to have to definitely game plan for him. Aubrey Miller, no doubt, maybe one of the best linebackers. I mean, if it wasn't for Isaiah Land, then you probably would have been talking about Aubrey Miller as the defensive player of the year. Tremendous linebacker, one of the best in FCS out of Jackson State. And then Jacob Roberts. Watch out for that young man from North Carolina A&T. He's a preseason first-team All-Big South guy. Believe me, that young man can play. Your defensive backfield looks like this. B.J. Bowler of Florida A&M's a holdover from last year. Shiloh Sanders from Jackson State is another one of the defensive backs. He was a second-team All-SWAC performer on last year. Brandon Barnes-Brown out of Fayetteville State. Remember, Joshua Williams was tremendous. 4th-round draft pick by Kansas City out of Fayetteville State, the first HBCU player taken in the National Football League draft just a couple of months ago. Well, watch out for the young man, Brandon Barnes-Brown, played opposite Joshua Williams. It was no mistake why Fayetteville State had one of the top-ranked pass defenses in all of Division II on last year. Finally, Shaquan Davis out of Alabama State rounds out your defensive backfield. It's a good player. Watch out for that young man as well. Your punter is Matt Knoll from Delaware State. He was a holdover from the All-America team last year. Jose Romo Martinez, as well, a holdover, was the place kicker out of Florida A&M. Brandon Codrington was your punt returner, another holdover out of North Carolina Central. Isaiah Bolden, another holdover, the kick returner out of Jackson State. And then your return specialists this year were Brandon Codrington, as I mentioned, as the punter, and then also Dayron Johnson out of Tennessee State. So that's your HBCU All-America preseason team. Your thoughts, you can hit us up via Twitter at BOXTOROW, BOXTOROW, and let us know what you think about the All-America team. Of course, this is the 16th year of the HBCU All-America team, and the voters comprise some of the voters from around the country that cover HBCU football. So that's it for today's HBCU Football Daily Podcast. Listen, I want you guys to have a wonderful weekend. Remember, when tweeting at us with respect to these HBCU Football Daily Podcasts, use the hashtag HBCU130, hashtag HBCU130. Thank you for making the HBCU Football Daily Podcast a part of your day. Don't forget to tell a couple of friends about the HBCU Football Daily Podcast. If you're watching us on YouTube, great, on our YouTube page at BOXTOROW. Also, if you're listening, you can or have downloaded the podcast. Of course, you did that at BOXTOROW.com or wherever you get your podcasts, including iHeartMedia.com. Have a wonderful weekend, and I'll talk with you on Monday.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the HBCU Football Daily Podcast. You can also listen to the podcast at BOXTOROW.com, iHeartMedia, or wherever you get your podcasts. Don't forget to get your HBCU football fix on BOXTOROW with Donal Ware each weekend on the radio station near you, and on SiriusXM on HBCU, Channel 142, and on ESPNU Radio on SiriusXM, Channel 84. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram at BOXTOROW for the latest in HBCU football, and don't forget to tell a friend.